When we think of those huge, world-changing breakthroughs, we usually picture a lone genius, right? Someone having a eureka moment all by themselves. But the truth is, that's almost never how it happens. They're usually born from intense and, frankly, intensely difficult collaboration. So in this explainer, we're going to dive into a challenge that's as old as science itself. How in the world do you get brilliant people to actually work together?
It's a real paradox, isn't it? We all know that bringing different minds together is the secret sauce for innovation. And yet, anyone who's ever been stuck in a group project knows the feeling. The misunderstandings, the friction, that feeling that you're all speaking completely different languages. So why is something so vital, so incredibly hard to get right?
To really get to the bottom of this, we're going to go on a little journey. We'll start by looking at what modern researchers are discovering about these invisible walls. And then we're going to rewind the clock about 400 years, back to the scientific revolution, to see how those exact same walls nearly stopped one of the greatest leaps in human history.
Okay, so modern research basically boils this down to three big barriers. First up, you've got disciplinary differences, and that's the simple fact that different fields see the world in totally different ways. Then there's professional integration. That's the personal struggle of finding your place when you don't really fit in any one box. And finally, collaborative practicalities, which is really just the nuts and bolts, the logistical nightmare of making a team actually function. We're going to use these three ideas to guide us.
All right, let's dive into that first one, disciplinary differences. And this goes so much deeper than just a simple disagreement. We're talking about fundamental clashes in language, in methods, and sometimes in entire worldviews.
This quote from a modern researcher really just hits the nail on the head. Even simple words can be huge walls. What you think is a common term in your field can be totally meaningless to someone else. Take the word experiment. To a biologist in a lab, that means one thing, but to a learning scientist in a classroom, it means something completely different. If you don't even have a shared dictionary, how can you even start the conversation?
Jargon is one thing, for sure. But what happens when your collaborators literally believe they are living in different universes? To see this barrier in its absolute most extreme form, we've got to go back to the 17th century.
So check this out. On the left, you've got the Ptolemaic universe. For more than 1,000 years, this was reality. You had an imperfect, unmoving Earth right at the center of these perfect heavenly spheres. And on the right, the Copernican model, a moving Earth orbiting a sun at the center. These weren't just two different theories. They were two completely incompatible realities.
And this gets right to the heart of the conflict. The church's worldview was built on theology, on scripture. The Earth had to be the center, period. But Galileo's worldview was built on what he could see with his own two eyes, through his telescope. He saw mountains on the moon. That proved the heavens weren't some perfect ethereal thing. His evidence wasn't just contradicting a scientific theory, it was contradicting a theological truth. They were arguing from totally different starting points.
So, there you have it. That's our first major barrier, defined. Whether we're talking about the 17th century or right now, disciplinary differences are what happens when people's training, their language, and their core beliefs about how the world even works are just fundamentally at odds with each other.
Okay, so let's move on to our second barrier because it builds right on top of this. It's not just about the ideas clashing, it's about the people. This is the barrier of professional integration, and it's all about that deeply personal struggle of being an outsider.
Listen to this quote from a modern researcher. It's so raw. It perfectly captures that feeling of being a disciplinary outcast. You've got one foot in one world and another foot in a different world, and you just don't feel like you truly belong in either one. It's this profound sense of being professionally homeless.
And this data from that same study is just fascinating. Look at the tension here. Researchers feel a much stronger sense of belonging in their professional communities, the groups they choose to be a part of. But their day-to-day morale is actually higher in their home department. It's like you have to choose. Do you want to feel understood, or do you want to feel supported in your actual career? If you're an innovator, it often feels like you can't have both.
And of course, this is not a new problem. 400 years ago, not fitting neatly into a professional box wasn't just isolating, it could be downright dangerous.
Just think about the stakes. Galileo, one of the most brilliant minds of his era, was put on trial by the most powerful institution on Earth for daring to share what he observed. And look at Maria Winkelmann. She was a respected astronomer. She discovered a comet, for crying out loud. But when her husband died, the Berlin Academy refused to give her his post. And why? Because she was a woman, and they were worried it would set a bad precedent. They weren't rejected because their work was bad. They were rejected because they didn't fit the mold.
So this brings us to the formal definition of our second barrier, professional integration. It's that fight for an identity, for a community, and for the institutional backing, things like jobs and funding that you desperately need to actually do your work. It's what happens when the whole system just isn't built for people who cross borders. Okay, so we've seen how different worldviews can clash and how people can get pushed to the side. Our third barrier is really about the ground game, collaborative practicalities. How do you actually build the connections you need to make a breakthrough happen? The thing you absolutely have to understand about the scientific revolution is that it wasn't just one person's idea. It was like a huge, multi-generational relay race. Copernicus had the big idea. Then Brahe came along and collected the best data in the world. Then Kepler, who was a brilliant mathematician, used that data to figure out how the planets moved. Galileo's telescope gave them the visual proof. And then, finally, Isaac Newton came and put the whole thing together with a universal theory. Not a single one of them could have done it alone. Their work was, at its very core, collaborative.
So how did they break through all that isolation? Well, they built their own communities. This here is the French Royal Academy of Sciences. In the 17th century, societies like this one, or the Royal Society over in England, they became absolutely vital. They were these protected spaces where scientists could share their findings, debate ideas, and build the trust they needed for that big relay race to actually work. They literally built the infrastructure for collaboration.
And that's exactly what researchers are trying to do today. We are still in the business of intentionally building these spaces, these bridges, designed to connect people across different fields. And here's the proof that it works. This table shows the results from a modern workshop that was designed to do just that, connect researchers. Just look at those numbers. Total connections went up, sure, but the most important number is that one right there. 8 brand new links were created across different disciplines. These workshops are the modern-day Royal Academy. They are practical, real ways to build the bridges we need. So, let's tie this all together. What do we really learn from this 400-year-long story about collaboration? And what does it all mean for the breakthroughs of the future? Well, the path forward looks remarkably similar, whether you're in the 17th century or the 21st. We need to intentionally create these spaces, the workshops, the communities, the journals, where people from different worlds can actually meet. We have to build an infrastructure that supports the people crossing borders instead of one that pushes them out. And that, right there, is the big takeaway. This friction, this struggle to connect different minds in different worlds, it isn't a sign that something's broken. It's the engine of progress itself. It's hard, it's messy, but it is absolutely necessary if you want to create something truly new. So I'll leave you with this final thought. The collaborations of the scientific revolution completely redefined our cosmos. They give us a new heaven and a new earth. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What revolutions are just waiting to happen right now? What new worlds are we failing to discover simply because we haven't yet learned how to tear down the walls that still stand between our best and brightest minds?